School time's approaching, and it's time to dig out those backpacks and get your kids ready for school. One of the things you might want to consider is, from a chiropractic viewpoint, there are problems that are created by the weight of the backpacks, and all children need to be aware of that, and particularly parents for the younger kids. And so we thought we'd do is talk a little bit about some of the research that we performed ourselves in our local community. We raised 3 children, and when our kids were in junior high, 6th, 7th grade, they were carrying backpacks that weighed up to 21, 22 pounds. And every night you'd pick them up and lift them back up on the kids the next morning, and luckily they were getting adjusted, so the soreness that they came home with, the problems they had, we were able to help alleviate, but we realized there was many people, many kids that didn't have that opportunity. And so what we started on was a project to do some research, determine what weight kids were carrying in the backpack, see if there was a solution we could create or come up with that might help the children. And we reverted back to some old, our hiking days in college and high school, and what we realized is when we go backpacking in the mountains, you would always put on a large, heavy waist belt, and that waist belt carried the weight of the pack. Pack might weigh 30 pounds, might weigh 60 pounds, but you could walk all day, take off the backpack, your back didn't hurt, you felt good. And the same with mountaineering types of things. You'll see heavy supports on the backpack. Well, what's different between that and your average child's backpack is that they don't have that waist support. You go to Costco or Target and you buy a backpack, got to have a new color every year, so they have a new backpack. But when the child goes into school, all the weight that they carry in those packs is sitting on their shoulders. And as a chiropractor, that is a serious concern for us, because we began to see that the number one complaint or cause for the back pain that many of the kids experience is carrying their backpacks. When do you hurt the worst? After I walk with my backpack all day. And so we find that we were looking for a solution. The first thing is, if they do have pain with carrying the backpack, get them in to see your chiropractor, let them do a spinal evaluation, determine if there is a curvature or misalignment of the spine that might be creating the problem. Alleviating that misalignment, subluxation, is going to help their body to be stronger so they can carry the weight. What we might see if we were to take a look at the spine for just a second is that if the spine is straight from the back, there is the strongest position for the spine. You put the weight on the shoulders with the backpack, it might weigh 10 to 15 pounds. The body has the ability from the side to act as though it was a shock absorber. The spine curves in the lumbar spine, the thoracic, and the cervical. The weight on the shoulder is absorbed to some degree by those curvatures. The problem exists if a spine has a slight curvature to it as a developing spine. You put 10 to 15 pounds on those shoulders, there is constantly stress forcing the spine further out of alignment. And that stress over time creates fatigue in the muscles, creates discomfort and pain in certain areas. We found that with our research, mostly it was neck and upper back, and headaches was the primary stress because of the pulling down on the shoulders. In our office, we found that the middle back area and the lower back often was the cause of origin of pain because of these spinal curves. Anyone with a slight curvature or scoliosis is going to see the problem aggravated by the carrying of the weight. So in our office setting, we began to realize we had a serious problem there. We wanted to reduce the stress on the developing spine and take away the symptoms and pain, obviously, that the patients came in with. So that was where we began. We also began to look at what could we do to help to evaluate the problem. So we went into the school system, and in our region, we went into 3 high schools and 2 grade schools. We evaluated over 530 children. When we weighed the children and we weighed their backpacks, we realized that the heavier the weight the child carried, the more likely they were to have pain. And what's interesting, in the junior high years, from 5th grade to 8th grade, the body size, particularly for boys, was smaller. The girls actually started growing more quickly, started about 13. But as those junior high years, the weight of the backpack was equivalent to 12 to 14% of their body weight. So what happened was, you might have a child who weighs 90 pounds, 100 pounds, and they might be carrying a 20-pound backpack. That would be like, for me as an adult, if I were to put a 40-pound backpack and walk around for most of the day, over time that is going to create fatigue or stress on my spine and create discomfort. So we began to look at this research and realize that the children in the younger years, if they carried more than 10% of their body weight, they were more likely to have pain. And what we found in the general statistics was the average child who walked around would have pain for women about 60% of the time, and for boys it was 39% of the time. So with the girls, it was a situation if they had pain over half of the time during the day, they said, yes, I have discomfort. So for the girls that walked through the average school, 60% of the time they had discomfort by the end of the day, over 50% of the time. And for the boys, it was around 40%, 39, 40%. So we realized we had a real problem. I knew it with my own children. We hear it in the office, and now we saw it in the general school population. We began to set out to try to show what effect that was having, and one of the interesting things we noticed was that of the kids that had discomfort, 25% of those kids were seeking medical care of some sort, 21% were seeing chiropractors, 2 to 3% were seeing medical doctors for medication to help to relieve the pain. It's kind of interesting being a chiropractor that many people were already realizing that the solution for this, if there was discomfort, was to see a chiropractor. We also found some interesting things, that there was more pain in boys in the 7th and 8th grade than there was in girls. And so as we got into high school, that changed. The boys' stature became bigger, larger body, less stress because of the backpack. Those were important things to realize. So from the younger age on through high school, it's important to try to keep that backpack weight to a minimum. The recommendation we came up with after the end of the research was to keep the backpack weight at below 10% of the child's body weight. We found that the kids that kept the backpack weight between 9 to 10%, they had a far less frequency of pain. When they went from 11 to 12% of their body weight, they were almost twice as likely to have discomfort. So it really does matter that the backpack is lighter. There's very few solutions. We talked to school administrators. Many schools now can't afford to buy a second set of books to have at home. Many schools are pulling lockers out of the schools because of safety concerns. You know, the idea of computers or laptops for every child is simply impossible at this point because of cost. So it really comes down to the parents doing all they can. Be sure when you use a backpack that you keep the heavier books and the larger books to the front of the backpack closest to the body. Some of the backpacks that are very wide end up creating a lot of pull back on the shoulders, and so the child has to change their posture to bend their head forward to try to counteract that. The other thing is be sure there's not extra papers in there. Sometimes kids will carry 2 weeks or 2 months worth of toys and papers in there that they're not really necessary. So be sure they have good padded shoulder supports, that you keep the backpack supported on both shoulders. Don't just sling it over one shoulder and walk around with it that way, because what it does is causes the body to try to compensate to keep the backpack from falling off, so you tend to put stress on the spine. You can imagine what that's doing to the cervical vertebrae. The other thing we found very helpful is, as I mentioned in the beginning, the waist belt, or having some sort of a support at the waist, is very important. In fact, you can take probably about 80% of the stress off of the shoulders by providing a waist belt. And in our particular situation, we designed a waist belt that could be attached to a backpack to give that extra support for the backpack that you might buy at Costco or Target that doesn't initially come with one. And these are a helpful solution. If you have a backpack with a strap support that's padded, that is by far a better situation. To any degree, you can transfer the weight from the shoulders to the hips. You're going to reduce the pressure and the compression on the spine, and that is essential. That is the one thing that you will be able to do to reduce the stress on a spinal curvature and the developing spines, and in the long run make a huge difference as far as the amount of discomfort that children have. Encourage your children to, again, keep the shoulder straps on both shoulders. Use a waist belt or find a backpack that has that support provided for you. Those are going to be beneficial things. The changes we make in this type of simple support is one thing that we can do as parents and as families to help our children have a healthier life, have a healthier posture and spine. And if we can begin to be aware of this, work together with our kids as much as possible to encourage them to change these things, that would be to the huge benefit of the family. The last thing would be sure, as I said before, it's important to have the child's spine and posture checked. Make sure the Curvatures are corrected to whatever degree is possible, especially in the younger children as they go through high school, keep them under care. We found in our office that maintaining the alignment of the spine helped to reduce much of the stress that was created by these day-to-day activities, that many things we can't control completely. We do what we can as much as possible, but the chiropractic care is a very beneficial support to that child's spine and to your family as a whole.